how far the jetpack technology has come along.
It's a very, very intense thing to do. There's only a few people in the world, I guess, that have flown it properly. It's got turbines just like a jet aeroplane, running at 600 plus degrees Celsius and 62,000 RPM. It's quite extraordinary. Cybersecurity, in terms of its fundamentals and the challenge, still is anchored into decades ago. The root cause of the problems that exist, especially in large enterprises in cybersecurity, are due to the fundamentals.
All the systems, they exist to facilitate humans in one way or the other. So humans remain at the core of anything.
I don't necessarily think that AI is a good thing. Everyone loves to jump on this sort of stuff, but we're in a real problem right now. AI is advancing over here at such a rate that we as humans and the fundamentals in our work, and especially in cyber, there is a huge dichotomy. And now we've got mental health within cybersecurity becoming a major, major issue as well.
Matrix can become a reality.
I think we're in it right now.
Well, hello everyone, I'm Umair. I'm the founder and CEO of TechCell, and I'm hosting this show with BetterTech. And we look into various technological advances and talk to C-level people to find what they are doing and how they see the world is going. Today we have Dan Haagman, if I've said it correctly, with us on the show. And he's the CEO of a company called Chaleit. And you are primarily, as I understand, in the cybersecurity business. So Dan, why don't you take an initial few minutes and tell us about yourself and your company, and we'll then dive into the conversation wherever it goes.
That sounds good, Umair. Thank you. Well, I guess I've been in cybersecurity longer than I care to remember. I think it's approaching something like 30 years. And I started my own companies around about 23, 24 years ago. So I've journeyed through cybersecurity in all sorts of functions and building companies around the world. And it's my life. It's my passion. I'm a nerd and I love helping people. And what a great place to do that with cyber.
Okay. So that's quite a bit of lifetime worth of experience in the cybersecurity. Do you do anything else other than cybersecurity?
Well, aside from 8 time zones a day, it's everyone says global's great, right? But I guess it comes with its downsides. But I love that, so I work in 8 time zones a day. But I also have another really interesting passion, which is commercial aviation. So I'm very fortunate, but I hold 2 commercial pilot's licenses. And only of late have I really seen the parallels between cybersecurity and aviation and the way they cross into resilience and safety. There's another thing I know that we've spoken about before, but I also fly the world's only true jetpack, and I've done that nearly 50 times now, and I'm still here to tell the tale just about.
I only tend to so far fly the jetpacks in video games. Not really, but I'm sure that must be exciting. I mean, what before we dive into the cybersecurity, how far the jetpack technology has come along? I mean, what time frames do you get while having one, and how you still need to be having some specialized training, or someone like me can also do that or something?
Well, I guess that was the original idea that, anyone who was non-trained should be able to do it. But what we found was quite the opposite. It's a very, very intense thing to do. There's only a few people in the world, I guess, that have flown it properly. So it started around the 1960s and you'd have seen the scene from James Bond Thunderball. I think it was 1967. Right. The person in that was a real jetpack. That one was powered by hydrogen peroxide, so it was rather dangerous. And he only had 11 seconds of fuel available on that on a chateau in France on the Thunderball sequence. And his name's William Suter, who's a friend of mine now and a mentor, I guess. I'm very, very lucky to have, collaborated with William on all things jetpacks. And then over the years, I think the tech and the dream was ahead of its time. And there weren't enough engines that were small enough, powerful enough, dense enough to be able to power these things. So that then changed, and along came the jetpack, and there's a couple of different derivatives of it now. And this is, literally something you put on your back and start. It's got turbines just like a jet aeroplane, running at 600 plus degrees Celsius and 62,000 RPM. It's quite extraordinary. It is quite an extraordinary thing to do.
That's quite something. Well, we'll talk more about it, and I also love to hear some of your parallels between aviation and cybersecurity. Now, coming to the cybersecurity, you can treat me I got trained as a software engineering and electrical engineering guy, and I run a company. But you can treat me for all practical purposes a kind of beginners in terms of cybersecurity. So my quest over here is to generally for everyone's understand what is typically a cybersecurity landscape look like in an organization. I was going through your profile, and you said it mentioned that you established that at London Stock Exchange. I mean, such large enterprises and medium-sized companies, when they think about cybersecurity, what kind of the various areas, teams, etc. I mean, tell us about the landscape. What goes in it?
Well, cybersecurity has been around a very long time now. And it's come from this, it was this sort of techie fun thing that then obviously met real risk. And yes, you're right. I mean, I was very privileged. I started my first, I suppose, proper job at the London Stock Exchange. There were 7 or 8 of us that essentially built the architecture for security there. And what a place to learn. My learning was crazy at the time. And I guess over the years it's evolved, and now we're in, the ex-industrial revolution, and things are going at an extraordinary rate with AI and all the other areas around software. But what's really interesting, Umair, is the fact that cybersecurity, in terms of its fundamentals and the challenge, still is anchored into decades ago. The root cause of the problems that exist, especially in large enterprises in cybersecurity, are due to the fundamentals. And I've got a few friends that I've asked who are, so I guess, very senior in the cybersecurity space. And I have asked them, why are we not dealing with these fundamentals? And I think there's 2 sets of patterns. One is we as human beings haven't changed. Mm-hmm. We still think in our same motivations, and we're slow to evolve relative to the things that we create. The second thing is the fundamentals are boring. No one gets rewarded for the unseen, hidden things that stop breaches. And it is as fundamental in my mind as that. So we've got amazing tech doing incredible things. But if you look at the root cause of most breaches, accidents, incidents within cybersecurity and the challenges that go with them, they're down to humans in one way, shape or form. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
Yes, it's extraordinary, but also, because all the systems, they exist to facilitate humans in one way or the other. So humans remain at the core of anything. So whenever you boil it down to something, it will eventually boil down to some human. Somebody who left that bug in this CloudStrike kernel, still at the end of the day, it's a human. So you're right in that sense. But I was just talking to someone, and we were having this consensus that, you cannot or try not to change your inputs. If you want to change your inputs, you'll have to change your inputs and processes. So in terms of fundamentals, what do we need to change that you have just alluded to in humans, or their processes or their inputs, to have this cybersecure environment?
Do you know, Umair, this has been one of those weeks when you just keep hitting on the same theme that comes up in different places. And one of the joys of being in so many different countries of operation is you see so many different flavors of people's thinking, different sectors, from fintech to biotech, from manufacturing through to pharmaceuticals. It's quite extraordinary. But there again runs another common thread that sits at the root of these fundamentals. And it's the fact that people are not thinking things through. And if you think about what's the root cause of that, if you extrapolate that back and think, what's causing that? It's time and attention. Mm-hmm. Human beings have this wonderful propensity to get distracted, get pulled to things that may or may not be relevant. And we're seeing so much in our industry as well. Burnout, overload. People are saturated. So how can you make clear decisions about the fundamentals when there are so many other drivers in your org preventing you from saying, I need to stop, slow down, and think? So this is, I think, another set of root causes. And so much so that in the last 6 months or so, I've got a background in psychology as well. And I am fascinated by human behavior, not in terms of emotions and things like that, but more in terms of organizational psychology. What's the root cause of this? So we've pulled on that thread and started to talk to psychologists around the world. And I have met more PhDs in this last 6 months than I have in my lifetime, and started to also ask them, what is the underlying factor that's happening in tech that is causing this? And it is absolutely down to those things. It's a function of overload, time, attention, distraction.
So when it comes to time, attention, distraction, I kind of agree with you on that fact that as humans, we are now getting more and more distracted, and with all this kind of positive reinforcing dopamine loop of social media and all that. We are getting more and more distracted. But so distraction and lack of time and attention is one. You also think capability is another dimension, even though that can be translated back to time and attention, because if you have time, you can train yourself. But let's say there is a capability gap. And we don't know what we don't know.
I totally agree with you. And I had this very conversation with someone in financial services yesterday, and she was really articulate about it. If we link that back to another set of themes, Umair, it's down to error. So many people now who enter our industry, they enter it with short attention spans and a lack of being prepared to sort of roll up your sleeves and get in there and realize that building true expertise around a domain takes years of compound effort, of knowledge, of practice. And you can't just walk in. You're in software. Developers, when we wrote code, we used to have to write our own libraries because they didn't exist. Now someone just drags and drops stuff and doesn't know really how do things really bolt together. So back to the fundamentals and the capabilities, wearing errors, sitting up at 3 a.m. because a kernel won't compile, plugging in something that you've spent, we did it at the stock exchange. We had one of the longest pieces of Cat5 cable I've ever known. And we had such complicated, really we were dealing with Cisco 6509s, big core switches at the time. And we had such a complicated architecture. We had to have plans for weeks and days in advance and rollback plans. And it's now 11 o'clock at night. We're worried about the startup scripts. We need to make sure that live trading is going to start the next morning to run the UK economy. We've got directors on the phone phoning us saying, how are you going? How are you going? And then we go to terminate this long piece of Cat5 to give us our resilient loop and find that the engineer who did it didn't crimp one of the cables correctly. But we've done all of this critical part of the complex stuff. Something was missing. And you learn at that point that no matter how much you rehearse, you're now against time, error, and your backside's on the line. You've got to make that come back and reverse everything you've done and make sure you hit it by a certain deadline. And it's those sorts of scenarios that I think that modern generation education and learning doesn't expose kids to this stuff anymore. It's not hard for them in many ways. Hard in some ways, of course, but not the things that you and I grew up with. We had to make our own stuff. And we learn from it.
I keep telling my kids that the biggest adversity they have is that they don't have any adversity, for that matter. So in a way, you mentioned that. But Dan, isn't it? The generation prior to us, they even have even more fundamental tools than as compared to we had them, but we managed to advance the digital transformation, the whole software shebang of the world forward. And as, who knows, 5 years down the road, AI must be writing most of the code. So I think this is a part of the way humans are evolving. And if you want to get it to extreme, we do not live anymore like in caves and go out to hunt and feed ourselves. So this is a part of evolution. That's how the things will come up. So what we can change to make sure that we also, while things are evolving, people are getting less skilled, our systems are still more robust.
Well, there's a word, and if you go to the root of your question, yes, we're evolving, but we're also suffering probably the most we've suffered in many years. You look at food quality, not whether it's available or not, but the food quality in big food. We're getting more and more unwell or not well. Yep. And this feeds our mentality and the whole cyclical system. That's one of my interesting areas of study, actually. I study food and nutrition as well. I don't know why. I just, I'm interested in it. I guess it's to fuel my thinking. I figured that, good inputs in allow good longevity, hopefully, but also good, clear thinking, good, calm emotions, and all the things that go with that. So whiz through with AI, I don't think it's doing us any good. Perhaps in some things like oncology, I've got friends who are leading the way in that and using AI, and it's just absolutely extraordinary. But there is such a concern that I have that it's taking the human endeavor away from things. And back to your point, hardships are a good thing. I've built companies, as I say, for so many years now. It is one of the hardest things I think that's out there. And you can't quit because too many people depend on you. And that forces that resilience and that journey, and you have to see it through. And also, of course, within you, you want to see it through too. So I don't necessarily think that AI is a good thing. You know, everyone loves to jump on this sort of stuff, but you know, we're in a real problem right now. AI is advancing over here at such a rate, but we as humans and the fundamentals in our work, and especially in cyber, there is a huge dichotomy. And now we've got mental health within cybersecurity becoming a major, major issue as well.
So Matrix can become a reality.
I think we're in it right now.
Yeah.
Just in a different way.
Who knows?
Algorithms and doom scrolling.
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows about that? I think you have a point over there. But then, given this as the setup, this is the hand we are dealt with, and we need to live with it, and we will improving that. So coming back to the basic in terms of cybersecurity, I think there are 2-3 fundamental for the more tech kind of audience and less philosophical audience that we have on this podcast. I think there are 2-3 fundamentals where I would like to take your advice on. In the landscape of a digital transformation, as companies move and grow over time, where are the various pieces comes in where they need to be aware of and approach the cybersecurity. Also, taking it further down at the fundamental levels in the overall software development lifecycle, eventually softwares become part of the digital transformation, where people should be aware of and how they should approach it when it comes to cybersecurity. And so these are the 2 fundamental questions from the company standpoint and from an individual standpoint who is developing a software and company who is going through a digital transformation cycle. How should they approach cybersecurity? What are the areas they need to look at? And how should they go about the game?
Okay, I think 2 words: modeling and complexity. And let me unpack those 2 very important things. By the way, I'm a big fan of analog as well, so forgive me for doodling away here. If we look at cybersecurity at its fundamentals, it's tech, not in isolation. It's with people and process as well. Right. And it's a wrapper. And so we need to model it. And ultimately, what are we trying to do? I think the industry does sort of chase its own tail to some extent in that it gets very caught up in cybersecurity for cybersecurity's sake. And that's a danger. And it drives these loops of a lack of appreciation of what are we ultimately trying to do. So my thoughts are very clear around this. It is a business problem. Mm-hmm. Because cybersecurity is a fundamental enabler and protector of a business. It manages an element of risk, not all aspects of risk, but a good element of it. So if we take an antidote to this, one of the things I really, really enjoy and love seeing happen is when people live the user and the business journey, because that takes us to the root of where cybersecurity problems exist. Mm-hmm. Our tooling, it's very easy to grasp on tangible things, reports, dashboards, analytics, all that great stuff. But that only measures what you set out to measure and doesn't know about like you said, the unknown unknowns. And so, look at some of the breaches of late. They've been in misconfigurations or let's just say poor sets of settings. Right. Tooling won't find that per se. Thinking will, or modeling it through. Start with the user journey. How do we authenticate? Against what systems? What's hosting it? What interdependencies are there? Where is the supply chain as we go through that journey? Mm-hmm. So we can unravel complexity very quickly by slowing down and threat modeling and understanding our threats and understanding that not all threats apply to all organizations. It's it's not a binary thing. It's so specific to a specific business. Your other point about software. There are a number of podcasts I've seen of late where people talk about taking time to catch up with tech debt. And that's a very, very valid thing to do. But again, if we look at it in a different way, if we involve cyber advisory at the core of a design and support and advise it all the way through, we get to the opposite, which I'm sure you'll smile about, which is security saying no because you're about to do a release. And then we find some horrible fundamentals with dependencies in them. No good. And the other obsession I think that so many people have is they chase tools. In so many, not all, but in so many of the programs, we advocate to remove the tool chain, which is counterintuitive. Counterintuitive. What's the antidote to that? Well, what we need to do is remove complexity. And we need to replace that with looking carefully and modeling materiality. Mm-hmm. What is it? Ask ourselves the question, what is it that will get us hacked?
Okay.
What is it that will get us hacked? And there's a sort of law or principle, I suppose, that you can coin.
It's similar to threat modeling, kind of. What is?
Totally. Yeah. Totally. You know, I think we need to accept that we're not going to close all vulnerabilities anymore.
Yeah.
So stop looking for them. Model them in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Understand the DevSecOps process, a well-refined one. DevSecOps does not mean toolchain. DevSecOps is a process through which good code is well architected to some cybersecurity standards that acknowledge a level of acceptable risk by the business. And we've got to stop saying to a developer, look at all this list of stuff that we found. Aren't we as cybersecurity great? There you go. You fix it. It's not good enough. We need to work on the principle, the law of subtraction. Let's remove things. Let's again slow down, hurry up and wait. Mm-hmm. And instead remove the burden and then instead think. And then we deal with priority and criticality. And that's what moves the cyber needle in software. Okay.
So essentially, we need to bake it in the system rather than impose on top of it afterwards. That's what you're trying to say, that, I mean, at every level, just sit back and see where the threat comes from, what are the various models, and then try to bake the security within the system instead of bolting it from the outside.
Absolutely. And let's relabel it. Let's not call it security. Let's use it as an enabling function and think of it differently, Umair. Let's think about safety, because no one writes code that doesn't scale, perform, integrate, and so on and so forth. There's a quality. So cybersecurity is a transparent, fundamental part of quality that doesn't over-dominate and have a greater voice and is proportionate. Then, as we bake it through, these principles are inherited at source. A very, very rudimentary and simple example is, don't start creating code until you've got some approved libraries. You'll know you're going to use them all the time. So don't go and grab some unknown library which can have an unknown bug in it. Let's approve the library. Now that our library was in with our repo, and we can then use that with the knowledge that we've assessed it. We've kind of baked those things in right at source. Something so simple. So simple.
Yeah, it's very similar to when it comes to software development lifecycle, that a bug that you catch at the level of requirement is far less expensive than what you catch at the end. So again, when you bake it into the system right from the beginning, it's far less expensive and far more secure. That's what I feel in that particular respect. Yeah. So you talked multiple times about the threat modeling. I mean, as someone who's relatively layman, as a CEO or someone, what are the various categories of threats that I can think and model my digital transformation, or for that matter, the software around it, and can use those to model that can help me model the threat overall?
Okay, this is a very, very important question you raise, Umair. As a CEO, we need to be going to the business and saying, what is your risk tolerance? What are your mandatories, your absolutes? What are the things you can handle? and what are the things that you accept? Because they define why we all exist. There's no code without a business. End of. So if we talk to the business, and often I will ask clients and say, especially at the C level, and I'm not necessarily meaning the CISO, maybe the CEO level, I will ask them, what's bugging you? What's bugging you? It's an unstabling question because people don't expect it. It's terribly informal, but actually it's probably one of the best questions you can ever ask. What's bugging you? And suddenly it sort of breaks down the barriers and they say, I'm actually really, really concerned about, my plant over here. I'm not worried so much about HR data, for example, that sits in the cloud, that's taken care of by someone else. I'm worried about in Western Australia, for example, I'm worried about the production of iron ore. End of subject again. What's bugging you? And then when we look at that, we can then look at the critical path of all the things that support the production of iron ore, because that's the most costly. And then if we model that, again, threat modeling, thinking through who would be an actor against a mine, for example, why would they do it? How would they hold that to account? Are they going to encrypt all the desktops? That won't necessarily stop the mine. Or will they focus on a part of that sort of iron ore rock crushing process and disrupt something like that? There's so many different ways of thinking. I use that example because it's so abstract, and people would say, well, hold on a minute. And another one is, how would one turn off an energy company? Mm-hmm. Well, often people will say, hit the refinery. The answer is no. Hit the finance department. Because then no one can invoice and the cash flow dries up very quickly within days because it's so capital intensive. So there's all sorts of ways of thinking about it. And again, I use very, very simple, generic examples there. But I really do believe it is a business top-down problem that when cybersecurity advisors need to then say, okay, I get that. Now let's go and take your use case of the business, my cup as a business, for example, and look, this cup is unique. It's got its own set of properties. How is it going to be attacked by who and how? Because there are themes. And, something that affects financial services will be very different to something in retail, for example.
Right.
So again, it's all about context. But I think if we start with the business and get them on board and get them expressing what concerns them, if a business outage is going to cost X, but the cybersecurity running CapEx and OpEx actually is much, much greater, then it's not proportionate, is it? Regulation aside for the moment.
It makes sense. And what I've noticed is, and that could be really something while talking to you, that a lot of times when you talk to some cybersecurity experts, they talk to you about specifics and tool chains. It's important to think more in terms of abstraction than generically. And then you'll be able to model it well and can figure out what you really need it to do. So I think it's a good way of approaching it. A lot of times the audience is CEOs. Do you recommend any particular place where they can kind of converse with themselves to identify to have these generic questions, somebody asking these generic questions, or that can kind of, hey, I never thought about that. Is there any site course, anything you do that they can subscribe to or something?
No, not specifically. The answer I'm going to give you is actually a very, I'm sure it'll make you smile. I didn't come up with this. This is a client of ours. Crowdsource it.
Yeah.
Interesting. So let's take the CEO. CEOs tend to share the same lonely problems as all other CEOs, and they need to talk safely amongst peers. What do? Have their networks, and then network with other peers in the industry and also outside of the industry to get diversity and flavor to the picture that you're trying to paint. And I think that crowdsourcing is otherwise known, I suppose, as knowledge sharing and experience gathering of other people and building that trust where we can ask. And I don't believe that any C-level function should sit in isolation. You're only as good as your knowledge base.
Right.
But so many people have warned the problems and investigated the solutions. That's how we operate as a business. I personally am very fortunate. I talk to between 1 and 5 CISOs a day.
Okay.
I listen and I learn. It's extraordinary what you learn from these people. They are so smart and they have well traveled through their careers and they've got so much advice, and most of them are so willing to give and share.
Sure.
So the forums, the collaborations, the industry verticals as well. Most industries share common problems. That's a wonderful way. You can talk to competitors. Why? Because you're all being hit by the same thing. Right. I saw it years ago just in the banking forums in the UK, and they were wonderful in the way that IT cybersecurity would get together between all the top banks and knowledge share. And they would have feeds in from law enforcement and other agencies that would help them make good decisions. It's a common set of problems. Crowdsource it.
Right, as I say, you become an average of 5 people around you. So I guess it's safe to say that your knowledge base is also an average of 5 people you talk to or you're around you. So the more people you talk to, the better knowledge base you have. No, wonderful. And before we end this, and as the last question, how you see AI and the cybersecurity? Is there any transformation that is happening? Because one fundamental thing that I've observed in which enterprises are actually working with or dealing with at the moment, because large language models or trained models are not within. The way enterprises used to work and as a response to threat is to have everything in-house and closed, logged somewhere. And with AI, they do not own those language models or anything like that, but they want to take advantage of that. At the same time, they don't want to send their data out. Apple is in a big shit in its own right, because their flag was waving around privacy and all that. And now if they have to train the AI, they have to share the data. So how are you looking at this in terms of this AI and the entire cybersecurity thing?
I think we have to ask ourselves a very important question, Umair, which is what on earth is happening to the data that we all knowingly or unknowingly place into this, or that is derived about us that's also being placed into this?
All the data placed, not only placed, what is happening to all the data that we generate all the time?
Exactly. And there's also a really interesting point around ethics as well, isn't there? So there was quite an uproar some, 2 or 3 months ago with a very common messaging platform where everyone in the industry suddenly discovered that they were by default opted in. And therefore they're training that vendor and their vendor's algorithms and so on and so forth. So the AI, I think, if we boil it back to some basics, there's some things we just cannot control in life.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I think we have to accept that. That's a fundamental. We assume we're breathing decent quality air. Our water is to a certain level of quality. You go out to a restaurant. We trust in this stuff all day, every day. Conspiracy theories aside, I'm not a great fan of them. I think there's many more things I like to apply myself to. But I think we just need to use common sense. And we cannot replace our key thinking with AI. And we have to think of privacy in all realms. And AI is just another realm of privacy, to some extent unknown at this time. But let's be honest, just like cloud was data centers, well, cloud is still a data center, just by a different name and structure. Yeah. So is AI, if you look at it in that way. So I think we just have to be cautious and use common sense, and perhaps not dump our security keys in with the code that we're getting assessed within AI.
Sounds good. So Dan, thank you very much. I think it was wonderful really talking to you. And I guess we have touched the topic in many ways very generically, which is a different, and I think whoever hears it will get something good out of that. So thank you for being with me today.
Umair, thank you.